A guy is strolling through town when he spots a bar with a sign that reads, "All the beer you can drink for $1. Thinking it's too good to pass up, he heads inside, sits at the bar, hands over $1, and asks for a beer. "Coming right up," says the bartender, who then pulls out a tiny shot glass and fills it halfway. The guy stares in disbelief. "Seriously? What's this?" The bartender grins. "That's all the beer you can drink for $1." One day, little Johnny asks his father, "Dad, why do grown-ups like to exercise in bed?" Wife was cooking dinner when she heard little Johnny ask, so she eavesdrops and listens to what her husband will have to say. Father, "Because it makes grown-ups happy." Johnny, "I want to be happy too." Father, "Then you have to wait until you're a grown-up." Johnny, "But who will exercise with me when I grow up?" Father, "Hopefully when you get married, it will be your wife." Johnny, "But Dad, how come our neighbor Sally exercises with you?" Wife rushes out of the kitchen. Ambulance arrives 10 minutes later. A man was hit by a car as he was crossing the road after leaving work for the day. He was taken to hospital with serious injuries. He sent the following text to his wife. "Honey, I got hit by a car outside of the office. Tina brought me to the hospital. They have been taking tests and doing x-rays. The blow to my head is very strong, maybe serious. Also, I have 3 broken ribs, a broken arm, a compound fracture of my left leg, and they may have to amputate the right foot." His wife was extremely concerned and rather anxious after receiving his text messages. Family safety apps. She replied, "Who is Tina?" A man came down with the flu and was forced to stay home one day. He was glad for the interlude because it taught him how much his wife loved him. She was so thrilled to have him around that when a delivery man or the mailman arrived, she ran out and yelled, "My husband's home! My husband's home!" A blonde and a redhead met in a bar after work for a drink and were watching the 6 o'clock news. A man was shown threatening to jump from the Brooklyn Bridge. The blonde bet the redhead 50 that he wouldn't jump, and the redhead replied, "I'll take that bet." Anyway, sure enough, he jumped, so the blonde gave the redhead the 50 she owed. The redhead said, "I can't take this. You're my friend. I have to admit, I saw this on the 5 o'clock news, so I can't take your money." The blonde replied, "Well, so did I, but I never thought he'd jump again." A mama mole, a papa mole, and a baby mole all live in a little mole hole. One day, the papa mole sticks his head out of the hole, sniffs the air, and says, "Yum! I smell maple syrup." The mama mole sticks her head out of the hole, sniffs the air, and says, I smell honey." The baby mole tries to stick his head out of the hole to sniff the air, but can't because the bigger moles are in the way. So he says, "Geez, all I can smell is molasses." Last night, around 11:50 p.m., my daughter gently woke me up. We'd just picked her up from her friend's birthday party a couple of hours earlier. My wife tucked her into bed while I passed out watching the Braves game. "Daddy," she whispered, tugging on my sleeve, "guess how old I'm going to be next month?" Still half asleep, I smiled and said, "I don't know, sweetheart." "How old?" She grinned and slowly held up 4 fingers. Not her own, just 4 small fingers. It's 7:30 a.m. now. My wife and I haven't slept. We've asked her 100 times, but she won't say where she got them. And she just keeps smiling. Sleep is no longer the biggest concern in this house. An old man gets on a crowded city bus, holding a tiny frog in a glass jar. He finds a seat next to a stunning young woman. She keeps glancing at the frog, trying not to stare. After a few stops and awkward silences, she can't help herself. "Excuse me, sir, what's with the cute little frog?" The old man leans in and says softly, "This frog is special, does something no man ever could." She laughs. "What's that supposed to mean?" He smirks. It's trained to please women. Her eyes go wide. Are you serious? He nods calmly. She giggles. That sounds ridiculous. As the bus ride continues, curiosity eats away at her. Finally, she says, all right, I've got to know how good this frog really is. Can I take him home? Sure, the old man replies. But if there's any problem, just give me a call. Later that night, the woman is lying on her bed, pants off, legs spread, waiting. The frog just sits there, staring. Frustrated, she grabs the phone. Hello, that frog you gave me, it's doing nothing. The old man sighs. I'll be right over. Minutes later, he enters the room, sets down his cane, walks over to the bed, and lifts the frog. He brings it close to his ear and listens. Then suddenly snaps. Okay, buddy, one more time. Watch closely, but this is the last time I show you. The local news station was interviewing an 80-year-old woman who had just tied the knot for the 4th time. Curious, the interviewer asked her about her life, her thoughts on getting married at this stage, and of course about her new husband's job. With a smile, she replied, he's a funeral director. The newsman found this intriguing and decided to ask a bit more about her previous husbands and their careers. She paused for a moment, reflecting on the journey, and then, with a grin, began, in my 20s, I married a banker. By my 40s, I wed a circus ringmaster. In my 60s, I found myself with a preacher, and now, in my 80s, I'm married to a funeral director. The interviewer, surprised by the variety, couldn't help but ask, why did you marry men with such different occupations? Here comes the punchline. She chuckled and said, well, I married 1 for the money, 2 for the show, 3 to get ready, and 4 to go. A man calls his wife and says, honey, I've been invited to go on a fishing trip in China with my boss for a week. It's a great chance for me to get that promotion. Could you pack enough clothes for the week, set out my fishing gear, and, oh, don't forget to pack my new blue silk pajamas. I'll swing by the house to pick everything up before we head out from the office. The wife, sensing something fishy but being a good sport, follows his instructions to the letter. She packs his clothes, sets out his fishing equipment, and makes sure to include his blue silk pajamas. A week later, the husband comes home, looking tired but pleased with himself. As soon as he's through the door, his wife bombards him with questions. How was the trip? Did you catch anything? Oh, absolutely, he boasts. Lots of salmon, bluegill, and even a couple of swordfish. But hey, why didn't you pack my blue silk pajamas? The wife looks at him with a knowing smile and says, I did. They're in your fishing box. Our honeymoon in 1949 was straight out of a romance novel. Train to Niagara Falls, champagne in a paper bag, and we danced until 3 a.m. Flash forward to our recent anniversary trip. I packed a lacy nightgown. He packed his orthopedic slippers and a heating pad. When I walked into the hotel room in full honeymoon mode, he looked up from adjusting his back support and said, I brought peppermint tea and I'm ready to rage, until about 8:50. I rolled my eyes and said, I brought silk. You brought a heating pad. He smiled, pulled on his socks with tongs, and replied, romance is comfort, babe. We were asleep before Wheel of Fortune even ended. But he still calls me the love of his life, mainly because my snoring wakes him up 5 times a night. One bright, sunshiny Sunday morning, Budro was sitting in church, when all of a sudden, in a great flash of fire and smoke, who appeared? But old Satan himself. All of the congregation jumped up and stampeded out the front door, except old Budro, who just sat in his place, apparently quite unimpressed. Satan goes over to Budro, the only person left in the church, scowled at him and asked, Hey, don't you know who I am? Budro calmly replies, Mais yeah, I sure do. Satan asked, Well, aren't you scared of me? Budro again calmly tells him, Nope, ain't afraid of you. The devil, slightly confused, asks him, Everybody is afraid of me. Why aren't you? Budro yawns, looks at the devil, and tells him, No reason to be. After all, I've been married to your sister for 40 years. The mother-in-law arrives home from shopping to find her son-in-law, Paddy, in a steaming rage and hurriedly packing his suitcase. What happened, Paddy? She asks anxiously. What happened? I'll tell you what happened. I sent an email to my wife telling her I was coming home today from my fishing trip. I get home, and guess what I found? Your daughter, my wife, Jean, naked with Joe Murphy in our marital bed. This is unforgivable. The end of our marriage. I'm done. I'm leaving forever. Now, calm down. Calm down, Paddy, says his mother-in-law. There is something very odd going on here. Jean would never do such a thing. There must be a simple explanation. I'll go speak to her immediately and find out what happened. Moments later, the mother-in-law comes back with a big smile. Paddy there, I told you it must be a simple explanation. She never got your email. A little old lady is walking down the street, dragging 2 large plastic garbage bags behind her. One of the bags rips, and every once in a while, a $20 bill falls out onto the sidewalk. Noticing this, a policeman stops her and says, Ma'am, there are $20 bills falling out of your bag. Oh, really? Darn, says the little old lady. I'd better go back and see if I can find them. Thanks for telling me. Well now, not so fast, says the cop. How did you get all that money? You didn't steal it, did you? Oh no, says the little old lady. You see, my backyard is right next to the football stadium parking lot. On game days, a lot of fans come and pee through the fence into my flower garden. So, I stand behind the fence with my hedge clippers. Each time some guy sticks his thing through the hedge, I say, $20 or off it comes. Well, that seems only fair, laughs the cop. Okay, good luck. Oh, by the way, what's in the other bag? Well, you know, says the little old lady, not everybody pays. Her fellow decides to take off early from work and go drinking. He stays until the bar closes at 2 a.m., at which time he is extremely drunk. When he enters his house, he doesn't want to wake anyone, so he takes off his shoes and starts tiptoeing up the stairs. Halfway up the stairs, he falls over backwards and lands flat on his rear end. That wouldn't have been so bad, except that he had a couple of empty pint bottles in his back pockets. And they broke, and the broken glass carved up his buttocks terribly. But he was so drunk that he didn't know he was hurt. A few minutes later, as he was undressing, he noticed blood, so he checked himself out in the mirror, and sure enough, his behind was terribly cut up. Well, he repaired the damage as best he could under the circumstances, and he went to bed. The next morning, his head was hurting, and his rear was hurting, and he was hunkering under the covers trying to think up some good story, when his wife came into the bedroom. Well, you really tied one on last night, she said. Where'd you go? I worked late, he said, and I stopped off for a couple of beers. A couple of beers? That's a laugh, she replied. You got plastered last night. Where the heck did you go? What makes you so sure I got drunk last night anyway? He asked, surprised. Well, she replied, my first big clue was when I got up this morning and found a bunch of Band-Aids stuck to the mirror. A police officer was making his usual rounds when something unusual caught his eye. A trail of $50 shells scattered along the sidewalk, leading into a dimly lit alley. Intrigued, he followed the money trail and soon spotted an elderly woman struggling to drag 2 heavy trash bags. One of them had a tar leaking $50 notes onto the pavement. Excuse me, ma'am, the officer called out. Looks like one of your bags has a hole in it. The woman turned, saw the money, and gasped, "Oh dear, thank you, young man. That could have been a disaster." The officer nodded, but curiosity got the better of him. "If you don't mind me asking, where did all this cash come from?" The old lady smiled and leaned in. "Well, you see, officer, I live in that nice house at the end of the street right next to O'Malley's pub. Every night, those drunk hooligans stumble out and, pardon my language, relieve themselves all over my garden fence." She huffed, shaking her head. "I got tired of it. So last night I stood outside with my garden shears and said, 50 bucks, or I snip." The officer burst into laughter, picturing the terrified drunks handing over their cash. "That's honestly brilliant." As the woman turned to leave, the officer, still chuckling, gestured to her second trash bag. "So, is that one full of money too?" The old lady gave him a sly smile. "Well, officer, let's just say not everyone paid." A federal DEA agent pulls up to a sprawling Texas ranch, stepping out of his shiny black SUV with an air of arrogance. From the first moment, it's clear he doesn't belong in the country. His neatly pressed uniform and spotless boots scream, "City boy," and he looks downright disgusted as he steps onto the dusty ground. He approaches an old rancher who's leaning against a fence post, chewing a piece of straw. "I'm here to inspect your property for illegal substances," the agent declares, pulling out a clipboard. The rancher tips his hat back and nods. "Sure thing, son. Look wherever you want. Just don't go in that field over yonder." The agent's eyes narrow. "Excuse me?" The rancher shrugs. "Just saying. You can search anywhere, but that field ain't a good idea." The agent scoffs, reaches into his back pocket and yanks out his badge, holding it up like it's the Holy Grail. "You see this badge, old man? This badge gives me the authority of the United States government. I can go wherever I want, whenever I want. And you can't stop me. Got it?" The rancher raises his hands in surrender. "Fair enough." The agent smirks and marches off toward the forbidden field, chest puffed out like a rooster in a hen house. Moments later, blood-curdling screams ring out. The rancher looks up to see the agent sprinting for his life, a massive, snorting Santa Gertrudis bull hot on his heels. The ground shakes with every stomp of the beast's hooves, closing the distance fast. The rancher tosses down his tools, rushes to the fence, and cups his hands around his mouth. "Your badge! Show him your badge!" Two friends were driving through Texas when they got pulled over by a state trooper. The trooper walked up to the driver's window and tapped on it with his flashlight. The driver rolled down the window and the trooper gave him a stern look. The driver asked, "What's going on, officer?" The trooper replied, "In Texas, son, you have your license ready by the time I get to your window." The driver quickly apologized. "Sorry, officer, I'm not from around here." The trooper checked his license, found it all clear, and handed it back. Then he walked around to their passenger side and tapped on that window. The passenger rolled it down, and the trooper looked at him with a knowing smile. The passenger, puzzled, asked, "Is there something wrong?" The trooper said, "Just making sure everything's in order. I know 2 miles down the road, you'd be thinking, I would have had a few words if that was directed at me." One morning, I turned to my wife and said, "I need to call the doctor today." She gave me a concerned look and asked, "Which doctor?" I paused, a little puzzled, and then replied, No, just the regular kind." She started laughing so hard I thought she might need a doctor herself. As it turned out, she had assumed I was talking about some sort of spooky witch doctor. So for the rest of the day, every time I passed her, she cackled and pretended to cast a spell on me with an imaginary wand. Later, when I actually did call the doctor, the receptionist asked, "What seems to be the problem?" I glanced over at my wife, who was still twirling her pretend wand, and said, "Apparently my wife thinks I'm cursed." The receptionist chuckled and said, Oh, it's probably just a case of the marriage magic. I hear it's highly contagious. A retired Marine Corps sergeant decided to take on a new mission, becoming a high school teacher. Just before the school year started, he injured his back and ended up in a full upper body plaster cast. But the cast was hidden under his shirt, and no one could tell. On day one, he walked into the rowdiest classroom in the entire school. Kids known for breaking teachers, not pencils. They had already heard whispers, "This guy's a former Marine." And they were ready to test him. He didn't flinch. He walked in, opened the window wide, and sat at his desk. A gust of wind sent his tie flapping like a flag in a storm. Without saying a word, he calmly picked up a stapler, and stapled his tie to his chest. Then went right back to taking attendance like it was just another Monday. The class? Dead silent. The rest of the year? Legendary. Moral of the story: discipline doesn't shout. Real authority doesn't need to raise its voice. Sometimes respect is earned, one staple at a time. A few days ago, after wrapping up a meeting at a hotel, I gave myself a desperate pat down, searching for my car keys. They weren't in my pockets. A quick sweep of the meeting room turned up nothing. Then it hit me. I must have left them in the car. Panic setting in, I rushed to the parking lot. My wife has warned me countless times about leaving the keys in the ignition. I always argue it's the best way not to lose them. She, on the other hand, is convinced that one day I'll walk out to find the car stolen. As I burst into the hotel's underground parking, I realized, with a sinking feeling, that her theory might finally be right. The lot was completely empty. I called the police, confessed my negligence, and reported my car stolen. Then came the hardest call of all. "Honey," I said, trying to sound calm. Side note, always use honey in situations like this. I left my keys in the car, and it's been stolen." There was silence. I thought the call had dropped, but then her voice cut through. "Are you kidding me?" she snapped. "I dropped you off." Now it was my turn to be silent, my face burning with embarrassment. "Well, come pick me up then." She shot back, "I will. Just as soon as I convince this cop I didn't steal your car." Ah yes, the golden years.